Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are doing a really quick and easy draft guard that goes at the base of your doors to keep the cool air out and help seal your warm air in. These are really cheap and easy to make. They would make really good Christmas gifts and just something to make for your house to help try to cut down on utility bills. I know where I live, our natural gas prices are doubling this winter. So you're going to start with a 9-inch wide strip of fabric and you're going to cut it to the length of your door. So if you measure at the bottom of your door, inside of the door frame, from one side to the other, and then you are going to add 1 inch to that length because you're going to be sewing the ends of this about 1/2 inch in. So whatever your door measures, add 1 inch to it. So what we're going to do first is create a small tube within the tube, and this is where we are going to place some items to weigh down our draft guard. That way it doesn't get kicked around as easily. So you're going to measure out a 3-inch strip of fabric and you're going to fold that in half at the bottom of your strip of fabric here. And you're going to do this going down the long sides, not the short sides. So your piece of fabric should be cut in a rectangle. You're going to go down one of the long sides of the rectangle. So folding that 3 inches in half, you will end up with a 1.5 inch wide tube. Now I'm going to my machine to sew this. You could hand sew this. You could also hot glue this if you're not somebody who's very good at sewing. However, if you hot glue it, you will not be able to wash this and it might end up ripping apart whenever you're trying to put the stuffing in it later. So I do recommend sewing. And when I'm sewing this, I'm just sewing along the very first mark that is on the presser foot on my sewing machine. So it's about 1/8 inch. And another option for fabric, if you're not someone who goes fabric shopping a lot and you're only going to be using your machine or you're only hand stitching this one project, another way to get some pretty cheap fabric for this would be to go to your hardware stores or home improvement stores and buy a canvas painter's drop cloth and cut it up. I think you can get like a 50-foot drop cloth for about $15 or so. Some places they're cheaper, and it depends what size you get. You really wouldn't need a big 50-foot drop cloth, so you could get a smaller one for cheaper. This is just some fabric that I had on hand. I actually bought this from Goodwill a few years back and realized I was probably never going to use it for any other project, so I did it for this because it is brown and white, so it will go with pretty much all of my decor all year round. The draft guards aren't just good for in the winter time, they're also good in the summer to keep your cool air in. And what you're going to do now is create the larger tube by taking the free edge of the fabric and matching it up to the very edge of that side that we just folded over. Like so. We're just going to match up the edges. And again, I'm going to run down with about 1/8 inch seam. And then we are actually going to come back and go up again to make a double seam on this. So what I'm going to do, I've sewn the first line. I'm going to rotate my fabric, go in 2 stitches, and then run right back down right along next to that seam that I've already made. If you're using a double needle on your sewing machine, you won't have to do that. It will just make this double line to begin with. I'm using a single needle, that's why I'm going back. And there you can see the stitching a little better on the darker side of this. And then we are just going to stitch one end of the fabric together. And here you can see that smaller tube that's in there. Okay, so I stitched one end of that tube, and now I have a turning tool. This is actually for turning out tubes of fabric and other items whenever you're sewing things that you can't get to very easy with your fingers. So you run this hook all the way down to the other end that we're trying to pull through. And you're going to hook it through the material as close to the edge as you can get. And what happens is whenever you pull down on it, that little clasp that you saw at the bottom will close itself and keep the fabric from sliding off of the end of that hook. And here you can see it through the material. And we're just going to get it started pulling through on the other end. And then you just keep on sliding it through using that hook. And then I use my other hand to kind of help guide the top part of the fabric. And of course I'm clumsy, so I dropped it. But then you just pull it the rest of the way through, and now your tube is turned right side out. And I guess I forgot to mention earlier, but when you sew this, you are going to sew it with the wrong side of the fabric facing out. The wrong side is the side where your pattern is faded looking, or there is just no pattern at all. Like on mine, my back side of this fabric is completely white, and then the top is what has stripes. Because you want your prettier side to be facing out, especially if these are Christmas gifts and you're going to use a really pretty Christmas printed cotton fabric. You want that design facing out. And now we are going to put our weight into this small tube that we'd sewed in there first. So what we're going to do is get a funnel. I'm going to be using brown rice because I'm not going to be washing my draft guards. We're going to be moving soon, so they won't fit my new doors anyway. But I would highly suggest the best product for this would be poly pellets. They're used for making weighted blankets. They are able to be run through the washer and dryer. They come in all kinds of different sized bags, also different colors, and you can get them in plastic or glass. I found these ones on Amazon, and that link is in the description box below for you guys. But like I said, I'm just going to be using some brown rice because it's super cheap and I had some extra in my cabinet. So you're going to insert the funnel into that small tube, pour in your poly pellets or rice or lentils, whatever you're using in there. The only thing is if you use the rice or beans or anything like that, you definitely can't wash your draft guards because they will get molded and your fabric will fall apart. Okay, so that is all filled with rice. You can see the mess that I made there with it. So, we only filled the small tube that is in kind of like the bottom center of our draft guard, and what we're going to do now, I left about a ½ inch for me to be able to sew that into place, and I'm just going to go over to the machine and sew that really quickly to keep that rice from spilling out. And what I'm doing on the machine whenever I sew this is whenever I start this seam that I'm sewing, I'm going to do a couple of back stitches on the end and then a couple of back stitches on the very, couple back stitches at the beginning of it, and then a couple back stitches at the end, just to keep that thread from pulling out and then causing that rice or your pellets, whatever you're using, to spill out. So I'm trimming off the extra thread here. It's always good to keep that out of the way so it doesn't get sucked into your machine and cause any problems whenever you get ready to sew the next portion of it. And so now it's hard to tell where the stripes are, but when I fold this little tube right here, these couple of white stripes are completely packed full. And now the last part that we have to do on this is stuffing the larger section of that draft guard, which is the larger tube. And for that, you're going to need some polyfill or a couple of old pillows. Take the stuffing out of there, whatever kind of stuffing you want to use. I just have polyfill on hand. I have an abundance of it, and this is just a plain old dowel rod that I have left over from another project. You can get one of them at any of your local craft stores, even places like your hardware stores will carry some of those. And most bags of polyfill actually come with a smaller wooden stick that's used for pushing the stuffing into little crevices and corners on your projects. So all I did was pull out some of that polyfill and kind of fluff it with my fingers. Whenever it's in the bag, it does get kind of compressed and packed together. You want to make it as fluffy as possible. And you're going to put as much of this into this larger section of the tube as you can. You want it packed nice and tight so that it keeps as much air out as possible. So here I've got mine completely stuffed. Again, I left myself about a ½ inch on the ends in order to sew it. So what I'm doing now, you're just gonna pack your stuffing down in there, and what you're gonna do on the very end, since this will not get turned anymore, is you're going to turn it yourself from the outside. Just fold it over and then pinch it together, and that is what you are going to sew. And I'm going to do a double line seam again, where I sew one seam, go over a couple of stitches, and then come back down. So that is the finished product on this. All of the sewing is done. Here on the very bottom is our weighted area where we added those pellets or rice, whichever you're using. And then your very top is what is going to be the foam squishy part. But your draft guard is finished. That is it. Super quick, easy project. If you have everything pre-cut, ready to go, all of your funnels and everything sitting around, this is about a 15-minute project or so. So really fast and easy to make. This is what it looks like at the bottom of the door. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I have lots more sewing and craft projects coming up. We also do haul videos and recipes. I did just join Instagram as well, so if you are on there, please give us a follow on that platform also. Like I said, description box below has the link to those poly pellets from Amazon. And thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you in our next video.